Welcome everybody in my part 2 series of making this outfit in Marvellous Designer. And in here we start with a pretty simple pant shape. We obviously, similar to how we do the sleeves, we always like to start with a short, because if you make something that's like super long, you make it more prone to artifacts and glitching. So it's much better to just start with a really small shape and you extend it from there. And similar to the shirt, I make a front and a back side, and this time I don't attach anything to the other. I make all four shapes separate. This is way too short, it's way too baggy, it's falling off my character. You can see that the top side is really baggy, and so I end up making the first curves at the top of the pants to make sure that all of my corners are appropriately right angled. And then from there I extend the legs of the pants and I reduce the width of the lower parts, since again I'm trying to make this to be very fitting over my character. And next step, I'm going to be extending the top of the pants, and I will be making darts in my pants, so on the top side, so that they better fit my character. One thing that I kind of overlooked at the beginning is you can see that the front and the back side are looking differently when I highlight them, and the reason for that is I didn't flip my pants when I put them on the back side of my character, so the back side of these pants have flipped normals. Now I later noticed that and I change it up and I fix it. You can just right click over the piece of the mesh and you press invert normals or switch normals, I can't remember what it's actually called, and that pretty much fixes that weird visual. But again, I've already said it once, I'll say it 1,000 times again, it doesn't matter, because I'm just going to apologize over it again, and it's not gonna have that weird artifact. All I really need is for the shape to hold a proper figure so that I can work over it. And this pretty much saves me time over sculpting, again, because sculpting cloth is really difficult, and so simulating it in Marvellous Designer or Blender or whatever is much easier and faster. So over here I'm creating darts in my pants and making sure that my angles are right angles properly, and I end up extending the pants to the top so that they can be overlapping my shirt. And you can see here that the lower part of the pants are really tight, so I end up expanding it a little bit so that they're not like spandex level of tightness. And I end up creating a strip that is supposed to be the top part of the pants that are gonna have the buttons and the belt holders or whatever they're called. Can't really remember the name. I create two, one for the front side and one for the back side. I sew them accordingly, and it takes a little bit of fiddling. For some reason it just didn't want to stick properly, so it took a couple of tries, but it's not the end of the world. You will get it right eventually. Then I start making the place for the main button of the pants, which is I just insert a line and I extend like a centimeter out so that it overlaps the other part, and then I edit my buttons to give it a decent shape and a proper size. Then I move towards making the part where the zipper is. And as you can see here, I just extend a piece of the fabric towards each other because one is gonna be on top of the other. And this is a part that I pretty much had to improv. I didn't really see a decent way online to actually make something like this, so I just made it from my own head, from experimenting. And that's like the beauty of Marvel's designer, is you get to do stuff like this. As you can see here, I'm just doing what I see is fitting. And obviously, if you look really hard, you will see that I actually made a mistake, and this whole shape should have been reversed and it would have looked better in my opinion. But alas, it works and it's fine. And when you're making a character or a game or a cutscene, people aren't really gonna focus on that area. So it's not that big of a deal. But this is something that I now notice in editing. But again, I'm really happy that I managed to make something like this from my own head, because I looked up a lot how to make something like this, and I didn't really see a lot of concrete tutorials on it. So You just have to work with it and experiment, do a lot of different little things and see what works and what doesn't, and work from there. As you can see, when I tried to cut a piece of the fabric out to sew to it, it ended up cutting from both sides since linked editing is turned on. So I had to turn it off, which is annoying because now I'm gonna have symmetry is turned off for this specific piece of the pants. So I'm gonna have to work double the work and make sure that proportions are measured properly on both sides. But thankfully Marvelous designer is really comfortable in this field, so it wasn't too annoying. And I finished this part and I sewed both of them together and it works fine. Now again, as I said before in my previous video, even though certain parts of the clothes shouldn't be sewed together, like for example the top of the pants where the button is supposed to be buttoned up, that place should not be sewed in real life. But in a model, in a 3D model that's supposed to go in a video or a game, that doesn't matter. And as long as the shape is maintaining itself, that's all that really matters. So for me, I just sewn it together and it looks proper, and that's all that really matters to me. Now I also wanted to make pockets for the pants, and again this is something that I didn't really see a lot of videos and tutorials on, so I just had to make it from my own head, and I think they came out pretty decently. As you can see here, I just cut triangles from the sides of the pants. I put dots in the middle of them and I dragged them down to make curves similar to pants opening. And then I made extended lines out of it so that they can act as the opening of the pocket. And this is pretty much what the pocket is. It's not really a pocket, it's an illusion of a pocket. It seems as if it's open, as if you can put your hands in, but it's not. And this is mainly to save fabric, to not cause glitching, because again, in 3D designing and 3D modeling, you never want to show, you never want to create something that isn't gonna be shown, and no one is going to see inside of this pocket, so you don't create it because you don't want to waste materials and polygons and resources on something invisible that's never gonna be seen. So this is the way that you make pockets in anything in general in 3D. As long as it's not gonna be shown, don't make it. Just make it seem as if it's there when it's not really there. All 3D designing is a magic trick essentially. You just make your players or your viewers believe that something is there when it's not really there. Over here, I wanted to add more shapes to the pants, and I create this like curved line in the back because I actually saw this design on other pants previously in real life, and I just thought that it looked cool, so I wanted to add it to add more shapes to the pants to give it more flair. And as you can see, I do it like this, and then I add internal lines on both the top and the bottom so that I can sew the ends to the insides of each part of the mesh, and it ends up creating this nice double fabric effect, which looks really nice as you can see. And this is something that you can do repeatedly over almost anything, but it just takes time and it makes things a little more complicated, so I didn't want to do a lot of it since this is supposed to be a beginner guide. And the pants are pretty much done at this point. I'm just ironing out the details and smoothing out certain things and the edges, alignment and everything, because as you start working on your piece and you start developing it more and more, previously finished off areas will get ruined a little bit because you keep on adding and adding on top of the model, and sometimes the previous areas that you thought were done get messed up again. That's just how things are. So you need to repeatedly go over your whole mesh, especially like after you're pretty much done with it, because when you change something at a certain part of the mesh, it might affect other areas of the mesh and you need to go back over it and fix it again. I then end up making I don't know what they're called actually. They're the straps that hold the belt in its place in the pants, and I end up making them. I just make an arbitrary count. I make like 8 or 10, and I put them intermittently across the top of the pants. One thing that I forgot to mention about this whole design process is making sure to layer the fabrics of the clothes. If you don't know, Marvelous Designer has an incredible system in it where once you tap on any piece of mesh in the 3D window or the 2D, in the properties of the piece of fabric, there will be a tab of layers, and depending on that layer, the simulation will determine where it should be on top of the mesh. Because, for example, the fabric of the pocket is supposed to be lower than the other part that's supposed to be going on top of it. So to do that, I give it a layer of 0 or 1, and the other part that's going on top of it, I give it a higher number of a layer. So what's supposed to be at the bottom most layer is supposed to give the lower value, and the thing that's going above it is supposed to be getting the higher value. So for example here with these belt holders, I guess I'm gonna call them that, I'm giving them a higher layer value than the piece that they're attaching to, because if the piece they're attaching to is layer 1 and they're also layer 1, then they're just going to be in the same space, which is gonna cause glitching and artifacting. So I end up giving this piece a layer 1, and then the belt holders that will attach on top of it, I will give it a higher layer value so that it can be on top of it. And this is especially useful when you're making multiple layers of clothes, like if you're making a shirt and on top of it is a vest and on top of it is a suit, then you obviously need to layer things differently. The shirt itself is gonna have a layer of 0, and then any pockets or anything that's going on top of it is gonna be a layer of 1. Then the vest is gonna be a layer of 2, and the pockets and everything above it's gonna be a layer 3, and then the suit is gonna be a layer 4, so on and so forth, and that's how you do it. And with this, I'm pretty much done with this video. As you can see, we finished the shirt and the pants. Now I'm going to give you a kind of assignment or a homework to do. I want you to add a coat on top of it. As you can see here, I've done this coat that goes on top of it, and I've added like these little straps that attach to it, top and bottom, and they add like extra flair to it. It looks pretty decent. If you really want to see a tutorial on how to make this coat, just write it down in the comments and I'll do it. I mean, I've already done it, so all I really need to do is just voice over. It's pretty simple. I hope you've liked this video and this tutorial. I'll see you in the next one.